Hello, everybody, and a big warm welcome to the Daily Express's Royal Roundup. It might be a little bit quiet as we've got Balmoral season, as some people like to call it at the moment, but it has not stopped the royal stories from coming in, of course. With senior royals stepping down, they're not really on the royal roster, as it were. So we do have a bit of news on the Invictus Games, which obviously involves Harry and his wife, Meghan. We've also got news on the Lionesses, the final this Sunday. Will we be expecting to see the royal family there or not? All to be discussed. Do you think that they should be there? Are you bothered if they are there? Let us know in the comments. And as we look on to September, which actually isn't that far away now, what can we expect from the children, from Prince George, Louis and Charlotte? Will they have big changes this school year? And we'll be seeing more of them as the year progresses towards Christmas. Can't even believe I'm saying the word Christmas. But there we are. Well, of course, we're joined by Richard, Daily Express's royal correspondent. Richard, hello. I can't believe I just said Christmas. I've shocked myself there. Lots to discuss, even though it is quiet at the moment. And the big topic at the moment is the Lionesses. They got through to the final. Incredible news. I think we're gonna have people down there at Box Park in London getting all the reaction, which I'm sure will be across the Daily Express's socials, and I'm sure lots of you will be watching. But this is a huge moment for women's sport. It's incredible. It just sport in general. This is a massive news. Will we be expecting to see the royal family there? Because something of this magnitude, you would surely expect somebody, a member of the senior working royal family, to be there.
Well, I think you would expect it. And as things stand, no members of the royal family are going out there. And I guess we're probably running out of time for them to make a U-turn on that. I mean, just before the meeting, I was just trying to get hold of somebody who seemed to be in a meeting. So maybe there's still discussion about it, but I just can't. They said definitively yesterday, the palace, that no, there is nobody going out there, and there's a bit of controversy about it. I think there are several aspects to this. I mean, it's always a slightly delicate issue because obviously the monarchy represents. Is not only the British monarchy, but it's the Canadian monarchy, the Australian monarchy, New Zealand monarchy. They've all had teams in there, some of the other Commonwealth realms. And William is closely identified with the English football setup. He's president of the Football Association, has met the women's team on a number of occasions, sent them good luck video.
He is with the manager pictured.
Yeah, went to the England training centre before they left and had a day there. He was at the final at Wembley when they won the European Championships last year. But no plans for him to go out to the final, which I think has astonished quite a lot of people.
And also, seeing as he is married to Catherine Kate, who's always been so vocal about women's sport in particular, you would have thought that this would be quite high up on their agenda. And without sounding slightly out of turn here, Richard, I do question if this was the men's team, perhaps it would be a very different story.
Well, and that's been a common theme. I mean, we saw the leader of the Women's Equality Party yesterday criticising William, saying exactly that. And when you've got a prominent member of the royal family being criticised by politicians, then that, albeit not an elected politician in that case, there's been a former sports minister saying that he should be going out there. Lots of other people and ardent monarchists, royal commentators, people who are not naturally critics, have been saying there should be somebody out there, and William is the obvious choice.
What about Catherine as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's that's the thing, but also the king. You know, as I say, the king is head of state. In the two co-host nations, I would have expected him to have been out there for the opening ceremony, or to at least visited at some point. And to me, the fact that this tournament was taking place in Australia and New Zealand at this time, would have been a perfect opportunity for a royal tour out there. And yet there's no sign of it.
But if William went to the training camp a week before they all left to go, is it a case of perhaps he just didn't expect them to get as far as they have done?
Well, the other point to make is that when England's men's team played in the World Cup in Qatar last year, the Palace made it clear that he didn't have plans to go out there, but should England get to the final, people close to him were saying, sure, he'll find a way of getting out there. He's opened himself up to accusations of sexism, really. I think if you're not English and not following this closely, then maybe you don't. You have explained quite well, Pandora, the context of this, but until the 1970s, women were banned from playing football in this country. There was a period, in the early part of the 20th century when they played, and they were quite successful. Particularly when men were away at war in the First World War, I think, and that became really quite popular. And then, I think feminists would say that it was sort of battened down, and they were sort of put back in their place, as it were. And it was only really from the 1970s that the women's game started to develop again as a sport, and it has grown exponentially. And England winning the English women's team has, if you look back at tournaments, has progressed steadily and got further and further in competitions. What's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, I think, has been fascinating, because actually I think this shows the media up in quite a good light, and we in the media get slagged off a lot by the public, but the broadcasters and the newspapers, but particularly the broadcasters, I think, have taken a decision to give equal billing to women's football and men's football in many respects. So, there are still criticisms made by some of the players that particularly at sort of club level, they're not paid the same amount of money, and they don't get the same level of media exposure still, perhaps. But we now regularly see ex-women internationals commentating on the men's game, giving punditry, and this, as you suggested at the start of this show, really, the fact that England have got to the final, whatever the result in the end, is a huge advance for women's sport in this country, and. For the royal family not to acknowledge that by actually going out there to the final is, has drawn a lot of criticism.
Well, I'd be interested to know other members of the royal family, such as Zara, who's been heavily involved in sport. Princess Anne, for instance, she's also been heavily involved in sport too. What do you think their reaction's going to be about this, Richard? Because I can't imagine it will be very good.
No, well, I suspect they may regard it as a mistake, but equally, the royal family likes to take August off. That's the fact about it. And William and Kate have taken a long holiday. That William's last engagement was July the 16th, when he and Kate attended the men's final at Wimbledon. And we're really not expecting to see them again in public until September, as things stand.
Is there any chance then, Richard, any chance of them or a member of the royal family being there?
Well, I would say not at this stage, but you never know. But the thing is that they've got to get out. The final is on
the hours.
Sunday morning UK time, Sunday evening Sydney time. So they haven't got long to get out there now.
No, they don't. I suppose they might have a little a plane ticket somewhere if they so need it. I think
they'll all be watching it on TV. They'll all be cheering on.
Yeah, and I suspect there'll be a social media post or two.
Yeah, it's not the same, is it? I think it's. I think a lot of people see this as a big mistake by William, and it's also evidence, I think, of what some people have said is a bit of drift in the monarchy at the moment. Phil Dampier wrote a piece for us in the paper this morning, suggesting that the king had got off to a very good start in the new reign, but there's been a bit of drift lately, and I think there's a need to refocus. Because and one of the things is why haven't they been to all of these Commonwealth realms? You would expect the new king to go out and visit these realms. And of course, I'm sure part of the equation is that in several of the countries, we talked about Jamaica before and some of the Caribbean countries, but also the prime ministers of Australia and New Zealand are Republicans, and you have to wonder. It's been hard. I was trying yesterday to get to the bottom of, was the king told you're not invited, or did he just? Because we do know that the chief executive of Football Australia, for example, said in February that it would be fantastic to see the king out at the tournament.
Almost from a perspective of somebody who perhaps doesn't follow the royal family, isn't so much of a fan of the royal family, this is not a good look at all. It really isn't. It's not helping their case. And I suppose some might say it's a little bit arrogant of them to not show up at all, Richard.
Well, yeah, that argument might be made. I think it's important to put the other side of the argument, although I don't think it's a particularly strong argument. What we heard from royal sources was that it was a long way to go for a couple of hours, essentially, for one football match. But they could have thought about this in advance. Could have built in a little program, potential program, if. And it didn't even have to be England. What about if Australia had won that semi-final and got there? The royal family of Australia.
They're still 100%.
And this is what some of the Australian monarchists are also saying is, they feel let down that the royal family haven't gone out there for this.
It is disappointing.
William hasn't been to William and Kate haven't been to Australia since 2014. It's a long, long time now.
Well, that's nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
That's not a good look. I think we've got a poll on this anyway. I was quite surprised by these poll results. Should Prince William attend the World Cup final? Cheer on the line. It says yes, 57%, no, 40%. This is the Daily Express's digital site, so express.co.uk. This is their view on things. But predominantly, it is leaning to the yes, that Prince William should go out. But the no, I was quite surprised by. But there you are. As you said, the clock is ticking. There's only so many hours they've got to get there. If they did leave on a plane, Richard, would we hear about it?
I think we'll be told if there's a change of mind. But as I say, I suspect it's too late. It's not just. The Prime Minister has also faced criticism as well because he's not going and he's sending the Culture Secretary. And then later yesterday, it transpired that the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is going as well. But the Prime Minister has faced criticism over it as well.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Well, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah. And as we said, if they do go, then I take everything I've said back.
I'm sorry. I should have developed that point. The alternative argument. There is the argument as well that the carbon footprint of going out to Australia for one football match, but of course that hasn't stopped the British government sending two cabinet ministers out there. And I don't know if they're going on a scheduled flight or a government private private jet, but the some arrangement could have been made there. And I think it's a difficult balance. I certainly don't think a member of the royal family would have faced criticism from the press over flying out there, over the carbon footprint for that. So that people online have been saying, "Oh, you would have criticised them the other way," but I just don't think that's the case.
Okay, well, that's the latest on that. Next, we have the Invictus documentary. Richard, we haven't heard a lot about this. The actual trailer hasn't been released, so I'm not really sure what we can say in it. We obviously know that this is one of Harry's big pushes. What can we expect from it, if there's anything that we know from it so far?
Well, the short answer is I don't know. We haven't covered this in the paper as far as I'm aware. And I suppose it's interesting because there was some speculation that it might have been canned. And clearly there was some speculation a few weeks ago that Harry and Meghan were going to be canned by Netflix, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So it's interesting from that point of view that it's going on air. I think it's on air on August 30th, and it makes sense to broadcast it to stream it when it just in advance of the next Invictus Games, and they're being held in Dusseldorf from September the 9th to the 16th. We know that Harry and Meghan are going.
And that's confirmed, they're definitely going together.
Yes, it has been, yeah. And on the Invictus Games, my personal view is that is the best thing that Harry ever did, really. Centre Bali is African charity, is also a real string to his bow. But setting up these games, I went out when he went to see the Warrior Games in Colorado, which was sort of gave him the idea to sort of do an expanded version of those Warrior Games. It's been a great idea and it's been well executed. I think, unfortunately, because of his hostility towards large sections of the British media, it probably won't get the coverage that he might have got.
But is this the coverage that he wants? He wants to get coverage because, I guess he obviously is very clear about what is said about him in the media. Would he want coverage for the Invictus Games?
Yeah, I think so. I think they always. Republican critics would disagree. They often argue that it's all about the royals. But I think the royal family would say about most of their projects, this is working royal family as much as non-working members like these, that they are. They want to focus on the people they're trying to help, and so they would. I'm sure they would like the focus to be on the competitors.
But
I'm sure there will be some media coverage, but it will be probably because large sections of the media won't be particularly welcomed there. I think it'll just be sort of from a distance mostly, and more about what they're doing as a couple.
I was going to say that a lot of it probably, I imagine, will be on their relationship because they've not been pictured together for a while. So I imagine lots of people will be concentrating so much on that.
Yes, you're probably right. Yes, I don't think they've made they were photographed coming out of a restaurant together.
Oh yes, they were.
Just before Meghan's birthday. But apart from that, it was when they were in New York and there was all that controversy. There'll be a bit of media coverage about it, I suspect.
Okay, I think we did a poll on this as well, which we can bring up. Will you be watching the Invictus documentary? No, 96% from the Daily Express's online site audience. Yes, 3%, don't know, 1%. But as you said, all this speculation about Netflix, well, it's obviously not being canned because this is going on there. So the relationship still seems to be going strong then for them. And they're obviously getting coverage for things that they want to talk about. So that we do know. Can you imagine that any of the other members of the royal family will be supporting this Invictus documentary openly, publicly?
Not publicly, I wouldn't have thought, no.
Okay, fine. Well, we're going to move on then. We will be touching on Prince Harry again, but in a slightly different manner. William's been handed a new military role, and it is in the same unit that Harry once served as a pilot. So obviously people are drawing comparisons between them and how much has changed for this to happen. Richard, you spoke about this, so I'd like you to give some context as to just how significant this story.
Well, yeah, the context of it was at the end of last week, the palace announced a raft of military appointments. I mean, they're honorary appointments, really. But they're important to the military. You know, the military, governments come and go, but the military owes its allegiance to the commander-in-chief, the monarch, and then the monarch has representatives who act as really the figureheads for their military units. And I just thought it was a symbol of how things have changed, that William has become Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps, the very sort of airborne wing of the army, which Harry was part of for 3.5 years, and he served in Afghanistan as a co-pilot, Apache helicopter co-pilot, had Harry and Meghan not quit their royal duties, it's likely, I would say, that Harry might have become Colonel-in-Chief of that regiment. He'd previously been back to present wings or present some sort of medals or honours to members of the Army Air Corps. So, and clearly very proud of his role in that unit. So. He is no more, and the military appointments have to be shared out between a smaller pool of working royals.
But he still evidently has a very strong place for military in his heart, doesn't he, Richard? Harry?
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah. I'm not so sure about the military's respect for him these days. I think there are divided opinions. There are some people who serve with him who speak very highly of him, and others who were critical of his decision to abandon a life of service to the nation.
Well, there we go. And do you think Harry would have heard about this news about William? Because obviously he worked within that specific unit, so I imagine this hasn't gone unnoticed. And I'm sure both of them, from both sides, I'm sure William also realizes this too. Surely.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't have gone down well with Harry, but there were other appointments that were interesting as well. Kate getting more military appointments, Sophie sort of taking. They each took over a role that Andrew had previously fulfilled, and I think the Duke of Gloucester, Duchess of Gloucester got some. So that sort of indicates that they're expecting to be around for a while, still working, even though they're sort of well past retirement age.
I wonder that the military's impression of the royal family as a whole, it did get brought up recently, which we discussed on the Royal Roundup, about potentially George not going into the military. Both William and Harry have obviously both been within it. And I'm just wondering of their opinion on the royal family in general, as, time goes on. Will they respect them as much as they once did, I suppose?
I think it's the ties between the monarchy and the armed forces are really important. Not just in this country, you see it across Europe. all of the constitutional monarchies really expect the heirs to go to serve some time in the military, and I don't think that's going to change in this country really. I find this fascinating. I think it's really important, and forgive me if I've mentioned this before. I think I probably have. Years ago now, I wrote a story about the Queen criticising the Blair government, the ministers, for not going to see injured troops, and sort of on the back of that, ministers started going to see injured troops. They hadn't been for a long time. This is when UK had forces fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. And but what was interesting was as well that when the government ministers went to see the injured troops, with life-changing injuries in hospital, in quite a few cases, the troops really didn't want to see them, because they were the people who'd made the decisions that had sent them out there. And I think the monarchy provides a little bit of distance and something for them to focus on, to be loyal towards. It means that the King, Prince of Wales, whoever, they don't have to make the difficult decisions about who to send into combat or whatever. So they can provide a bit of focus for loyalty there.
Yeah. And of course, I'm sure the King is very, very pleased with this military appointment as well for him too.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. As I did say, we're moving swiftly on to September very soon. I won't say the C word. I'll probably have to say the Christmas word after the C word. Moving on swiftly on. Let's go on to schools in September for George, Charlotte, and Louis. Now, we did focus on this a few months back, if you're regular watchers of the Royal Roundup. And we did discuss, the fact that Kate wants them to have a more private life, which is why they've moved away from the centre of town, etc., etc. But they're obviously all growing up, Richard. September is going to be a start of a new school year for them. And is there any news on what we can expect from them? In particular, I want to focus on George, please.
Well, no, I mean, there isn't. And that's the interesting thing, that when previous heirs have been to school, there have been regular updates. So, when William and Harry were at school, the press were invited in to see various shows they were in, or sports days, and similarly with the then Prince Charles, and I mean, before that it didn't really happen. Queen Elizabeth the then Princess Elizabeth was educated privately, just at home, but this it's a bit of a mystery. I think we did touch on this. We don't really know what George's favourite subjects are now. We knew what they were a couple of years ago.
And is that because William and Kate are quite protective over what gets shared to the public?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and clearly since those days when William and Harry were young, there have been new press guidelines come in, media guidelines. When broadly, media shouldn't interfere, try to report on kids in full-time education. Some might argue, well, a future king, there should be an exception there, but we've not seen anything. Not even some pictures released. We know that George is keen on sport. He likes playing football. He plays football for the school, I think. There were some pictures on social media of of William, watching him play in a London park, if I remember rightly, and but they didn't appear in the sort of mainstream media because of the ethical guidelines, really. So it's just one of those things. I mean,
and how do they keep the kids so down to earth? Because all of their classmates are going to know exactly who they are. So how do they deal with that, Richard?
Well, I think you could argue that by excluding the public from lots of information about how they're getting on at school and who their friends are and what their favourite subjects are and whatever, that does give them the space, I suppose, to just have as normal a childhood as possible.
And I suppose they will definitely, when they go to school, from a security perspective, for the people who might be wondering, there'll always be security there in some kind of aspect.
Yeah, I'm sure, yes.
There will have to be.
Yeah. Because one of the interesting things to me is that, I half expected their kids to go to state schools, certainly for some part of their educational.
Yes, I remember.
And that's just not happened. And I think it was going to happen. It would have happened by now. And I think there used to be an argument that, well, if they went to a state school, there'd be all sorts of people selling stories about them. But that the guidelines I mentioned really would make that very difficult. And clearly, actually, it didn't stop stories coming out when previous generations were at independent schools. So I think those guidelines, mean that they could go to any school they wanted, and I guess it's down to parental choice, as individual freedom. But I think quite a lot of people would have liked to have seen them educated.
Yeah, I think, well, that's the argument, isn't it? Well, they're part of the royal family, a lot of their lifestyle we are, as a public, paying for, which inevitably will help the children. So yes, I can imagine there will be a bit of that. So do you think William has taken anything from his parenting from Diana and from Charles into his childhoods, into his children's lives at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is that he doesn't want to see his children exposed in the same way to sort of media coverage. If you think back to pictures of the Harry pulling funny faces at the photographers and whatever, and I mean, I just think they are much more protected than William and Harry were at that age, and I think many people will probably say that's a good thing.
Understand?
And understandable.
Okay, then. Well, that will give a little bit of an indicator as to what's going on. We will keep all of our eyes on the screen on Sunday to, of course, the main event, the Lionesses. But it will be interesting to see whether the royal family do turn up. And as we look on to September, hopefully we'll hear some more news. And on the days of their first day of school, Richard, can we expect any pictures from those?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the pattern, I'll be surprised. I mean, I think the pattern has been when they've started a new school, there's a picture, but because they're just going back to the same school, it's, as things stand, we might not hear anything more until they decide which school George is going to go to when he's 13. Okay. We were talking about the fact that they were looking around Eton a while ago. So that's a little bit of time away yet.
Yeah, and Eton is remarkably expensive now. I think the fees have gone up again. So God knows how much it is now. But yeah, there you go. Well, I'm sure all of the latest you'll of course hear on the Raw Roundup from Richard and myself. It'll be interesting to see when the Invictus documentary does get released. Will we be hearing anything on that front? Well, all of the Raw news, even when it's quiet, there's still things to discuss. So we will be back next week, and then the week after we'll be off for a couple of weeks, but then we'll be back in the role of things for September, which is when we will start seeing more of the Raw family out and about, as it were, as they've had August off. All right then, Richard, thank you. Hopefully we'll be back at the end of next week. We'll of course let you know when that is. You can watch all of our episodes over on our playlist on Facebook. We premiere on YouTube every single Friday at 4 p.m. UK time, but of course you can watch back on there. And you can of course sign up to our WhatsApp as well if you so wish, to get all of the latest royal lines on there too. All of the details are over on our social channels, or you can go have a look at the paper too to read all of Richard's exclusives. So yes, Richard, thank you, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks.